I hope everyone has enjoyed your 4th of July weekend so far, and that your fur babies made it through all the fireworks okay. I want to start today by talking about the second most famous guy named Thomas Bennett. All right, the most famous Thomas is right over there. Got a mural of our guy here in little 5 points, but the second most famous, Thomas Bennett, was also, as it turns out, a Baptist. Thomas William Bennett was born in Morgantown, West Virginia in 1947 and raised as a devout Southern Baptist. It meant he was of fighting age during the Vietnam War and served as a corporal in the infantry. For his actions in February of 1969, Bennett was awarded the Medal of Honor. And to quote from his citation, on 9th of February, the platoon was moving to assist another platoon which had run into a North Vietnamese ambush when it became heavily engaged by the intense small arms, automatic weapons, mortar, and rocket fire from a well-fortified and numerically superior enemy. In the initial barrage of fire, 3 of the point members of the platoon fell wounded. Corporal Bennett, with complete disregard for his safety, ran through the heavy fire to his fallen comrades, administered life-saving first aid under fire, and then made repeated trips carrying the wounded men to positions of relative safety from which they would be medically evacuated. Corporal Bennett repeatedly braved the intense enemy fire, moving across open areas to give aid and comfort to his wounded comrades. He valiantly exposed himself to the heavy fire in order to retrieve the bodies of several fallen personnel. Throughout the night and following day, Corporal Bennett moved from position to position, treating and comforting several personnel who had suffered wounds. On 11th February, Company B again moved in an assault on the well-fortified enemy positions and became heavily engaged with the numerically superior enemy force. 5 members of the company fell wounded in the initial assault. Corporal Bennett ran to their aid without regard to the enemy fire. He treated one wounded comrade and began running toward another seriously wounded man. Although the wounded man was located forward of the company position, and Corporal Bennett was warned that it was impossible to reach that position, he leapt forward with complete disregard for his safety to save his comrade's life. In an attempt to save his fellow soldier, he was mortally wounded. What makes all of this more remarkable to me is that Bennett was a conscientious objector. He opposed killing on religious grounds. So when he signed up to serve, he served only as a medic. Bennett refused to kill the other guy to win battles. Instead, he was willing to put himself in danger to save lives and to heal. And opposing killing did not make Bennett a coward. He was brave. He was courageous. He was selfless. It's just that his mission was to save lives and not take them. He wasn't trying to be powerful. He was just trying to heal people. As Pastor Mimi mentioned last week, we will be talking about healing in worship all this summer. Our gospel passage today had 2 stories linked by this theme of healing. And in the first, Jesus visits his hometown and began to teach in the synagogue. It appears people there are none too thrilled to see a simple man stepping outside his station. He speaks with authority and with learning. And from what we know of Jesus' ministry, he probably had some words for his hometown about how they treat the poor, how they cared for the sick, how they care for the marginalized, the excluded, the oppressed among them. And all we really know is that Jesus says a prophet is not welcome in his hometown. Well, that's probably because the job of a prophet is to tell the truth, the unvarnished truth. Biblical prophets do not predict the future. They describe the gap between what is present and what God dreams for our lives, which means they tell the hard and unsettling and uncomfortable truths. There is nothing here to suggest that Jesus does not love his hometown. There is no word that implies he hates his house, his kin, his home. But the reference to prophets being unwelcome probably means that he spoke some kind of hard truth to them. And it didn't go well. Perhaps the people of his hometown had an assumption we often share, that if you love something, you can never criticize it. You can't say a bad word about it. But what Jesus knows is that the reverse is what is true. To truly, truly love something, you have to love the reality of it. You cannot love an idealized image of it, a half story, a pretend made-up version of it. True love means loving the ugly parts as well as the beautiful parts. And if all you see are flaws, if all you do is criticize, you won't be able to love. But if you refuse to see the flaws, if you pretend that something or someone is perfect, that's not real love either. Real love is taking in the full reality of something and loving it anyway, not in spite of its flaws, but because those flaws are just part of it. And this, to me, is one difference between patriotism and nationalism. Because nationalism has no room for reality. It's this thin love of a country, of an idea of a country, not the truth of a country. It's an affection for a sanitized, watered-down version of history that doesn't think about slavery or patriarchy. Nationalism has no room for reality. And because it only asks you to love a sort of half-imaginary, idealized version of something, it's not real love. Right now, one of the major political forces in this country is Christian nationalism, which implies that to be a good American, you must be a Christian and you must love their version of what America is. Christian nationalism implies that only Christians belong in America, that Christians need to have power in America. It leaves out the history of religious liberty upon which we were founded. It leaves out the non-Christians who have been part of our story. It leaves out a whole lot of black and brown Christians because it tends to imply that it really only belongs to the white Christians. Christian nationalism goes against what Jesus stood for, goes against historic Baptist principles of religious liberty, and it's cheap because it doesn't ask much of you. You don't have to wrestle with history. You don't have to find consensus among diversity. So instead, what we need is a prophetic patriotism. Loving the country of your birth because you're a part of it, and so it is part of you. And yet this sort of patriotism can acknowledge flaws. It can accept a full history. You can measure this country you love against God's dream for our world and admit where it comes up short without loving it any less. It's just like Jesus walking into his hometown and telling the truth. And you know what? Jesus the prophet was not welcome in his hometown, yes, but he still tried to make it better. Even in this place where Jesus didn't appear powerful, the scripture says he was still able to heal people. And in this second part of our story, we have more healing, and Jesus immediately sends his disciples out to heal people and cast out demons. Now, if you are confused about demon possession and what we are to do with those stories, come back next week. We will be talking about that. Today, if you're confused about the specific directions that Jesus gave his disciples here, okay, let's look at that. No bread, no bag, no money, only one tunic instead of a second to keep out the cold. Okay. Jesus wants his disciples to be marked by simplicity and a reliance on generosity. Okay? Seems the point isn't to be powerful, it's to heal people. And then there's this instruction: if any place will not welcome you, and they refuse to hear you as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as testimony against them. I don't know about you, but when I first started reading my Bible, these words sounded so full of judgment. as if the point was to go out and force every town to believe your message. And if they don't, I'm going to tell Dad, and he's going to smite you. But now I think we read it that way because we've gotten so used to Scripture being a weapon deployed against people that we don't even realize when we're doing it. Instead, I think what Jesus is saying is this: if you offer to help, if you come and you say, I have found a source of healing, I have found a power that can transform your life, a power that can change lives, it has altered the course of my life, it has made me whole, and it can heal you. And if you say all that and someone says, no thanks, walk away. Let God handle it. Don't demand they let you help. Don't try to control them. Just walk away. How many times have you been absolutely twisted up because you knew the solution to somebody else's problem and they were not listening to you? They did not want to hear what was so obvious to you. If someone doesn't want to be healed, you can't force them. If someone doesn't want to fix something in their life, you cannot force them. You can say, I'm here. You can say, I'm willing to help if you are willing, but you cannot force them. We live in community and we care for each other and we want to look out for each other, but at the end of the day, the only thing you can control are your own actions. And this story is clearly not an excuse to be callous and uncaring, because the disciples aren't supposed to go, okay, well then I give up on all healing everywhere. No, they just move on to the next place. They are supposed to offer healing there. What Jesus knows, what we forget, is that when you try to change someone against their will, when you try to coerce them into being something else, when your goal is secretly to be powerful enough that you can make someone do the right thing, that's not actually healing. That's just you being in control. That's the pursuit of power instead of the free gift of love and compassion. And how often do we trick ourselves into thinking we want power to make things better when we could just go out and offer to help? How often do these Christian nationalist types think that the point of being Christian is to be in power in your nation, to be in control of government, to force everybody to live according to your one narrow version of Christianity? How often all of us see our relationships, our life in community, like a battle between two opposing sides. Battle where only one side can win, where only one side has the right answer, and we are always so desperate to prove ourselves right, so desperate to prove that we're the ones who, not the ones who started this particular fight, that, it wasn't my turn to do the dishes in the first place, that my political views are actually correct. We're so desperate to be right that we see all of life as a battle to be won, as if we're soldiers in a war, and our goal is to defeat the other side. When instead, we could be running into the fray, offering healing. Like Corporal Bennett, who did not carry a gun in anger, who would not kill, but was heroic and brave and selfless. The church has too often acted like a soldier instead of a medic. It made allies with the Roman Empire, with colonial governments, with conquerors and imperialists and slaveholders, and it demanded Christianity at the point of a sword. We became soldiers when we were supposed to be medics. The word salvation, this loaded term, one of the translations for that is healing. That's what we're supposed to offer. As the church and within the church, as individuals, we don't need to treat every conversation like a battle to be won, proving that our faith is best, that our opinions are correct, that our way of life is better. We will have better communities and better relationships and better homes if we stop trying to win. Stop trying to force our ideas or our solutions on everybody else. Instead, we can simply ask, how can I bring healing into this situation? That still means we have to be brave. still have to be courageous, still have to be selfless, but instead of trying to win, instead of looking around for enemies, we were looking for someone who needs help. Who needs someone to sit with them and just listen? Who's lonely? Who's going through a thing? Who needs a meal? A babysitter? Who needs a break or a ride to the doctor? These are the questions we can ask if we seek to live up to our true purpose. We can ask, who needs bread and juice? It's not much, but it reminds us of one who was willing to die rather than seek power, who came to heal and kept on healing even when put on the cross. The one whose resurrection reminds us that God's healing grace can overcome even our cruelest instincts. So today, let us go to the table together